And so that brings us to the final definition that kind of just combines all of the previous definitions. Sex differences are real if they are biological and immutable, meaning that they aren't cultural, they aren't learned differences, because learned differences that are based in culture are going to vary across time and space. And so they need to be rooted in biology, but then they need to be immutable. And so the quote from page 54, perhaps a sex difference could count as real if it were observed, had a known biological cause, and could not easily be overcome by social interventions like training and priming. So under this definition, how many traits would be considered real? Certainly not many of them. Your book talks about, to some extent, would like gender identity and sexual orientation, particularly maybe sexual orientation, maybe there still would be a certain high difference between, females being attracted to males and males being attracted to females, although probably not the same size difference as it is in a society where heterosexuality is compulsory, more or less, or feels compulsory, or has been compulsory in previous decades. But the conclusion is it probably just isn't a lot of traits. This chapter was really just a long way of justifying the point that it started off with, that we are, as humans, we are a species that has low sexual dimorphism. And, to go back to my original, throwing like a girl example, although there are these physical differences in strength, once again, especially, and some of that does seem to be biological, like body mechanics, it also has a lot to do with culture, which hopefully you figured out if you watch the Always commercial, right? The messages that we get about women being ladylike and women being strong and not needing to do push-ups on our toes, and whether or not, we grew up in families where we were encouraged to throw balls around or not throw balls around. The fact that there is that variation means that this isn't necessarily an immutable characteristic. And even if it were immutable, although it's not, and this is from another study that just kind of once again compares males and females, but and it shows the overlap between the two. I always like to use this chart, and I give you a link to the study, because yes, although at the tail ends of strength, there are men that are much stronger, and there are women who are much weaker in terms of physical strength. And in particular, in this study, it was measured by long jump, high jump, and javelin throw. There are those overlaps, right? There are clearly in this society plenty of men who are not athletic, and there are women who are athletic who are overlapping with those non-athletic men. So there is this gap between the most athletic women, at least as measured by long jump, high jump, javelin throw, and the most athletic men. But once again, there isn't this perfect distinction between the sexes. And then if you move away from something like physical strength, which, you might argue in our society is becoming more and more obsolete, to personality characteristics like assertiveness, you can see that there are now these huge overlaps, right? That although there are a little bit more men that indicate that they're assertive and a little bit more women that indicate that they are not assertive, that there are instead that compared to the physical strength chart, that there are huge overlaps when we start talking about behavior.